She asked for a partner with no demands. Only a human believed her. In the distant future, humanity had spread across the stars. The Earth, now just one of many planets in the galaxy, was home to countless human colonies. The story begins on a spaceship called the Horizon, traveling through the empty reaches of space. Its mission was to make contact with alien civilizations and expand humanity's reach. But this time, the ship was carrying something far more important than just explorers. A single human, Marcus Grant. Marcus wasn't a soldier or a diplomat, but a simple engineer from Earth. He had been chosen for this mission because of his vast knowledge of technology and his reputation for solving problems under pressure. The only thing he knew for sure was that this mission could change everything for humanity. He didn't quite realize how much it would change him. The Variant were an ancient species known across the galaxy for their advanced technology and their intimidating power. They had been silent for centuries, and no one had truly understood them. Despite their silence, rumors had spread of their mighty capabilities and the wisdom they held. When the Horizon intercepted a distress signal, they were the first to send a human representative to meet with the Variant. For the crew aboard the Horizon, it was a moment of excitement mixed with fear. Marcus, however, had his own doubts. He didn't think he was cut out for this. He was just a man from Earth with no experience in diplomacy, no military background, and certainly no idea how to communicate with a species that could control minds with a mere thought. As the ship entered the Variant system, Marcus stood at the observation window, watching the approaching planet. The planet itself was a sight to behold, vast and quiet, with swirling clouds of violet and blue, surrounded by ancient structures that seemed to stretch out into the stars. It looked like a place untouched by time. The crew was nervous, but Marcus was calm. He had learned long ago that calmness in the face of fear was the key to surviving in space. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The message they received from the Variant had been cryptic, but it clearly indicated a desire for contact, for communication. The moment the Horizon entered the planet's atmosphere, the tension grew. The crew anxiously watched their screens, waiting for any sign of the Variant's response. Then a soft voice came through their communication system. "You have arrived," the voice said. It was calm, serene, yet undeniably powerful. Marcus couldn't help but feel a shiver run down his spine. He had expected to hear something more formal, something more commanding. But this was different. This was personal. The voice on the other end knew they were there before they even arrived. The ship touched down on the surface, and a small shuttle was prepared to take Marcus to the Variant capital. He stood before the crew, giving them a brief nod, trying to calm his own nerves. He knew he had to represent humanity, but he wasn't sure how he was going to do it. As Marcus stepped out of the shuttle and onto the surface of the Variant city, he was struck by how serene everything was. The city was unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering structures of glass and metal with intricate designs that seemed to pulse with energy. The air was thin but breathable, and the ground beneath his boots was smooth, almost polished. He was greeted by a figure, a Variant named Zyra. She was tall, her skin shimmering with a faint blue hue. Her eyes, however, were the most striking feature. They glowed faintly with a soft, inner light, and when she looked at Marcus, he felt as if she were seeing straight through him. "Welcome to our world," Zyra said, her voice soft and yet commanding. Marcus stood still for a moment, unsure how to respond. He had read reports about the Variant, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The way she spoke, the way she moved, it was as if she was a being not bound by the same rules as humans. "I'm honored to be here," Marcus finally said, his voice steady. He wasn't sure why he said it, but it felt right. She seemed pleased by his response, nodding slightly as she gestured for him to follow. As they walked through the city, Zyra explained the history of the Variant. They had once been a peaceful race, thriving in their knowledge and technology. But over time, they had grown weary of the constant struggle for power with other races. Now, they lived in isolation, hidden away from the galaxy, watching but not intervening. Their culture was unlike anything Marcus had ever encountered. The Variant believed in absolute harmony, where every individual's needs were met without the need for conflict. It was a world without demands, without expectations, a society built on understanding and balance. Marcus, however, could see the underlying strain in Zyra's demeanor. Despite the outward appearance of serenity, there was something more, something deeper. Zyra's eyes betrayed her unease, as if she were searching for something but couldn't quite find it. As they reached the heart of the Variant city, Zyra paused and turned to face Marcus. Her expression was unreadable, her voice steady as she spoke. "I've waited a long time for someone like you," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "Someone who doesn't demand anything from me, someone who only seeks understanding." Marcus felt the weight of her words. He had always believed that humans were a species of action, of ambition, driven by the need to conquer, to demand. But here, in front of him, was someone who was asking for none of that. Someone who sought only connection, only peace. "I don't understand," Marcus admitted, his voice low. "Why me? I'm just one person." "You are the first human to understand," Zyra said softly. "The others have come and tried to make deals to seek power or knowledge, but you are different. You understand that the greatest strength lies not in demanding, but in being." Her words hit him harder than anything he had ever heard. It was as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes, and he saw everything in a new light. The Variant weren't just another species, another empire to conquer. They were a reflection of what humanity could become, a society that didn't demand but gave, that didn't seek power but peace. "I don't know if I'm the right person," Marcus said, his voice uncertain. "But I'll try to understand." Zyra smiled, a rare and genuine smile. For the first time since their meeting, Marcus saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Then we begin," she said simply, and together they stepped forward into the unknown. Marcus stood beside Zyra, looking out at the vast expanse of the Variant city. The city seemed endless, stretching far beyond what his eyes could see. The buildings were tall and elegant, made of a smooth, shiny material that reflected the soft light of distant stars. The streets were quiet, but not empty. Everywhere he looked, he saw people moving gracefully, their footsteps barely making a sound. Zyra's presence beside him was commanding, yet gentle. There was something different about her. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met. Even though she was an alien, there was a sense of familiarity in the way she spoke, the way she carried herself. It felt like they were two souls meeting at the right time in the right place. She turned to Marcus and spoke in a voice that was both calm and powerful. "You must be wondering why I brought you here. The Variant have been in isolation for centuries, watching from the shadows. We've seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations, but there is something different about humanity. You have a strength that no other species possesses." Marcus wasn't sure how to respond. He had heard stories about the Variant, how they were ancient and powerful, and how their society was built on knowledge and peace. But standing here now, listening to Zyra, he felt like he was on the edge of something much greater than he could understand. "I don't feel special," Marcus said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "I'm just an engineer. I'm not a soldier or a leader. I don't have any powers or skills that make me stand out." Zyra's eyes, which shimmered with an inner light, softened. "It's not about power or skill. It's about what you bring to the universe. Humanity has something that many species have forgotten, the ability to care, to show kindness even when it seems impossible. The Variant have long since lost that connection. We have lived in silence for so long that we have forgotten what it means to be truly connected to others." Marcus thought about her words as they continued walking through the city. He had always known that humans were capable of great kindness, of great love. But to hear it from someone like Zyra, someone so different from him, made him realize just how special it truly was. Maybe he hadn't been chosen for this mission by accident. As they moved deeper into the city, the atmosphere changed. The air grew cooler, and the buildings around them grew more intricate, their designs becoming more complex and beautiful. Zyra led him into a large building that seemed to pulse with energy, as if it were alive. The walls were made of a transparent material, showing images of distant stars and planets. In the center of the room, there was a large, glowing crystal, surrounded by what looked like ancient tablets. Zyra stopped in front of the crystal and turned to Marcus. "This is the heart of the Variant," she said softly. "Our knowledge, our history, all stored within this crystal. It is the source of our power and our wisdom." Marcus stepped forward, mesmerized by the glowing crystal. He could feel the energy coming from it, like a low hum vibrating through the air. He reached out cautiously, his fingers brushing the surface of the crystal. Instantly, images flashed in his mind, visions of ancient battles, peaceful moments, and the rise and fall of civilizations. He saw glimpses of the Variant's past, their successes, their failures, and their ultimate isolation. Zyra watched him closely. The Variant were once a thriving civilization, but we have become disconnected from each other. We placed our value in power, in knowledge, and in control. But in doing so, we lost the ability to truly connect with one another. That is why I sought you out, Marcus. Marcus turned to her, his mind racing. You want me to help you connect with others again, but I'm just one person. I don't know how I can do that. Zyra's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a hope, a desire for change. It's not about what you can do alone. It's about what we can do together. You have the power to remind us of something we've forgotten, to show us that true strength comes not from control, but from understanding, from compassion. That is something that the Variant have lost, and it is something that humanity still holds on to. Marcus stood silently, processing her words. He had always believed that humanity had something special about it, but hearing it from Zyra made him feel like they had a responsibility. Not just to themselves, but to the universe. Maybe this mission wasn't just about saving Earth. Maybe it was about reminding the galaxy what it meant to truly care. Over the next few days, Marcus spent more time with Zyra, learning about the Variant. He discovered that their society was built on the foundation of knowledge, but it was also one that required strict adherence to tradition and order. Every aspect of their lives was dictated by logic and reason, and emotions were seen as weaknesses. The Variant believed that true peace could only be achieved through control, but Marcus saw something different. He saw the cracks in their society, the loneliness that lay beneath the surface of their perfection. Zyra took him to different parts of the city, showing him the beauty and the emptiness that lay in the hearts of the Variant. They visited places where Variant children played, but there was no laughter, only silence. They saw groups of Variant elders in quiet meetings, discussing plans for the future, but there was no warmth in their conversations, only cold, calculated logic. It was then that Marcus realized what he had to do. He couldn't change the Variant overnight, but maybe, just maybe, he could help them see the value of connection, the value of empathy, of living in a way that wasn't ruled by control and logic, but by understanding and compassion. I think I understand now, Marcus said one evening as they sat together in a quiet corner of the city. The Variant have everything they need, but they've forgotten what it's like to feel, to truly be with someone not because of what they can offer, but because of who they are. Zyra nodded, her eyes filled with a deep, thoughtful expression. You've seen it, Marcus. You've seen what we've lost. Marcus took a deep breath. And maybe it's time for us to find it again, together. The next day, Zyra introduced Marcus to the Variant Council, the highest authority in their society. The council was made up of powerful leaders who controlled every aspect of Variant life. They were wise, but their wisdom had come at the cost of their hearts. Zyra had brought Marcus here to show them that there was more to life than just control. As Marcus stood before the council, he felt the weight of their gaze on him. These were beings of unimaginable power and knowledge, and yet they looked to him, a simple human, for answers. He wasn't sure what he could say, but he knew that now was the time to speak. I've learned something from the Variant, he began, his voice steady. I've learned that true power isn't about control, it's about understanding, about showing compassion even when it's difficult. You don't need to rule over others to find peace. You need to connect with them, you need to care. The room was silent for a long moment, and for the first time Marcus saw a flicker of something in the council members' eyes. It wasn't fear or anger, but something softer. Something hopeful. Zyra stood beside him, her presence unwavering. The Variant have been lost for too long, but with your help, Marcus, we can find our way again. It wasn't going to be easy. The path ahead would be filled with challenges. But Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. He had come to the Variant seeking knowledge, but he had found something much more important. A chance to bring humanity's greatest strength, its capacity for compassion, to a civilization that had forgotten it. And together they would rebuild the Variant, not through control, but through connection. Days turned into weeks, and Marcus's presence among the Variant was becoming more accepted. But even as things began to change, there were still many challenges ahead. The Variant had a long history of keeping their emotions in check, and breaking down centuries of tradition was not going to be easy. Marcus knew that, but he also knew he had to try. He couldn't help but feel like the Variant needed something more than just peace and control. They needed to rediscover the joy of living, of feeling. Zyra had become his closest ally in this mission. She was unlike any leader Marcus had ever encountered. There was a depth to her that he hadn't fully understood at first. She had the wisdom and power of her people, but she lacked the warmth that came from human connection. And now, as they worked together, Marcus could see the cracks in the cold exterior she had built around herself. He could see that she longed for something more, something real. One evening, as they sat together in a quiet garden outside the city, Marcus spoke up. Zyra, I've been thinking, maybe we should start with the younger generation. The children, they haven't been as affected by the old ways, and they might be the ones who can lead the change. Zyra considered this. The children? Yes, they are still open, still learning. It might be a place to start. But what would you have me do, Marcus? Teach them to feel? Marcus smiled. Not just feel, teach them to connect, to be there for each other, to care not because they have to, but because it's the right thing to do. Zyra nodded thoughtfully. You're right, perhaps the change will start there. The next day, Zyra arranged for Marcus to meet with a group of Verant children. The children, unlike the adults, didn't have the same cold demeanor. They were curious, eager to learn, and open to new ideas. Marcus was both excited and nervous. He had never been around children like this before, children who had been raised by a species that viewed emotions as weaknesses. How could he make them see the importance of connection? When he entered the room, the children's eyes lit up. They were small and bright-eyed, their skin glowing with the same faint blue hue as the adults. They didn't speak much, but their gazes were full of curiosity. Marcus felt a pang of empathy for them. They had grown up in a world that didn't allow them to express their feelings fully. They were taught to be quiet, to hold their emotions inside, and to focus solely on logic and reason. But Marcus knew they were capable of so much more. Hello, Marcus said, kneeling down to their level. My name is Marcus. I come from Earth, and I have a different way of thinking. I want to talk to you about something important, something that might change the way you look at the world. The children gathered around him, their eyes wide with interest. You see, Marcus continued, where I come from, people don't just think, we feel, we care about each other, we connect with others because it makes us happy. We share our joys and our sorrows, and we don't hide who we are. A young girl, no older than 8, raised her hand. But isn't it better to be strong, to not show weakness? Marcus smiled gently. Strength isn't about hiding your feelings. True strength comes from understanding others and being there for them when they need it. Strength comes from love and care, not from keeping everything inside. The children were silent for a moment, processing what Marcus had said. He could see the wheels turning in their minds. He didn't expect them to fully understand right away, but he hoped they would begin to question what they had been taught. One boy, a little older than the others, spoke up. But if we start caring for others, won't it make us weak? Won't it make us vulnerable? Marcus looked at the boy, his expression thoughtful. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's courage. It takes courage to open your heart to someone else. It takes courage to care for others even when it's hard. The room was quiet for a long moment as the children absorbed his words. Finally, the young girl spoke again, this time with a smile on her face. I think I understand. It's like when we share our toys, it makes us feel happy. Marcus's heart warmed at her response. Exactly. When you share, you create a bond with the other person. It's not about the toy or the object, it's about the connection you build together. Zyra, who had been watching from a distance, walked over to Marcus. Her expression was soft, but there was still a sense of determination in her eyes. You've made a difference, Marcus. I can see it in their eyes, but we can't stop here. We need to spread this message beyond the children. We need to show the adults the importance of connection. Marcus nodded. I know, but the children are the first step. They're the ones who can change the future. If they understand the power of caring for others, they'll teach the adults. Zyra smiled, a rare sight that brought a warmth to her features. I'm glad you're here, Marcus. I never thought I would find someone who could help us understand this. Together, Marcus and Zyra began to work with the Verant children, teaching them how to connect with each other and how to show empathy and kindness. It wasn't an easy task. The adults, especially the council, were skeptical. They had spent so many years building a society that valued logic and control above all else. They didn't see the value in teaching their children to feel, to connect with one another. But Zyra was determined to make a change. As weeks passed, Marcus noticed subtle changes. The children began to interact with each other differently. They laughed more, shared more, and showed more compassion. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but it was a start. And that, Marcus knew, was all they needed. One day, as he was walking through the city with Zyra, he asked her, "Do you ever wonder what would happen if the Variant had learned to connect like this long ago? If they had embraced their emotions instead of pushing them away?" Zyra's gaze softened and she looked up at the sky. "I do wonder, but we can't change the past. We can only change the future, and we are doing that, Marcus. Together we're making a difference." Marcus smiled. "Yeah, together." The future of the Variant didn't look as bleak as it had when Marcus first arrived. There were still many challenges ahead, and the path to true change would not be easy. But Marcus had faith. He believed in the power of human connection, and he believed that the Variant could find their way back to the heart of what truly mattered: love, understanding, and empathy. As he looked at the city around him, he knew that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but with Zyra by his side and the children leading the way, Marcus was ready for whatever came next. Together, they would rebuild the Variant, not through control or power, but through connection. And that, Marcus believed, was the true strength of any civilization. As Marcus continued to work with the Variant children, a small but noticeable shift began to take place. The children were slowly embracing the ideas Marcus had shared with them, ideas about connection, empathy, and the importance of caring for others. But while this change was encouraging, Marcus knew it was just the beginning. The real challenge was the Variant adults, particularly the Council. The Variant society had long been built on a foundation of logic and order, and emotions were seen as weaknesses. Changing centuries of tradition would not be easy, especially when so many of the Variant held onto the belief that control and intellect were the keys to survival. The council members were powerful and resistant to change, but Marcus was determined. He knew that if they could convince the council, the rest of the Variant society would follow. One morning, Zyra called Marcus into her private chamber. She looked serious, more serious than usual. "Marcus," she began, "the council has called for a meeting. They want to discuss the changes you've been encouraging among the children. They are concerned that this shift towards emotional connection is weakening our society." Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. He had expected resistance, but he hadn't realized just how deeply ingrained these beliefs were. "What do you think?" he asked softly. Zyra sighed and looked out the window at the distant city. "I believe in what we're doing. I believe that the Variant can be stronger, not just in mind, but in heart. But the council, they don't see it that way. They believe that if we let emotions rule us, we will lose our edge. They think it will make us vulnerable." Marcus thought about her words. He understood their fear. The Variant had been isolated for so long, their power and knowledge serving as their shield against the dangers of the universe. To them, emotions might seem like a threat to that shield. But Marcus knew that this was about more than just strength. It was about living fully. What if we show them that strength comes from connection, that caring for others doesn't make us weak but stronger? Zyra turned to him, her eyes filled with both doubt and hope. "That's what I'm asking you to do, Marcus. You've shown the children what it means to care. Now we need to show the council, but it won't be easy." Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm ready." The council meeting was held in a grand hall at the center of Variant City. The hall was vast, with tall columns and high ceilings that seemed to stretch into infinity. The Variant elders sat at a long, elevated table, their faces expressionless, their eyes sharp and calculating. They were dressed in robes of silver and blue, their attire reflecting their status and power. At the head of the table sat Elder Varros, the most powerful and influential member of the council. He was the one who had opposed the changes the most. Zyra and Marcus entered the room, and a hush fell over the council. The Variant elders studied them closely, their eyes filled with suspicion and judgment. Marcus felt the weight of their gazes, but he stood tall, determined to make them see what he had come to understand. Elder Varros spoke first. "Zyra, Marcus, I understand that you have been encouraging the children to embrace emotions, to feel and care for one another. But this is not the way of the Variant. We have built our society on logic, on reason. Emotions are weaknesses, and weakness will lead to our downfall." Zyra stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Elder Varros, I understand your concerns, but what we've been doing isn't about abandoning logic. It's about finding balance. We can be logical, we can be wise, but we can also care for one another. We can build connections that make us stronger, not weaker." The council members exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with Zyra's words. Elder Varros's expression hardened. What you're suggesting will lead us into chaos. If we allow emotions to guide us, we will lose our purpose. The variant must remain in control of our destiny, not be ruled by feelings. Marcus, who had been silent up until that point, spoke up. Elder Varros, I know what you're afraid of, but I've seen what happens when we refuse to embrace our emotions. I've seen the isolation and the loneliness that comes with it. I've seen how it can break a society from the inside out. The variant have spent so long focusing on control, but you've forgotten what it means to truly live. The council looked at him with skepticism, but Marcus continued, his voice steady. I come from Earth. We're not perfect, far from it. But we've learned that the strength of a society doesn't come from how much we control or how much we know. It comes from how we treat each other. It comes from caring, from building bonds that make us strong, not just in body, but in spirit. Elder Varros's eyes narrowed. And what if your idea of connection leads to our destruction? What if we become weak and vulnerable because we let our emotions dictate our actions? Marcus met his gaze without flinching. What if your control leads to even greater isolation? What if your fear of vulnerability is what's keeping you from realizing your true strength? I'm not saying we abandon logic or reason. I'm saying we embrace the whole of who we are. We can be strong and we can care. That's the true power. The room was silent for a long time as the council members absorbed his words. Zyra stood beside him, her expression unwavering. Elder Varros remained silent, his gaze fixed on Marcus. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold and calculating. You have a lot of faith in your beliefs, Marcus, but this is not just about you or Zyra. This is about the future of the variant. If we change now, it could have consequences we cannot predict. Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but filled with conviction. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. Sometimes you have to trust that change can be good, that it can lead to something better. The variant have the potential to be more than just powerful. You can be compassionate, you can connect with each other, and in doing so, you will become even stronger. For a moment, it seemed like Elder Varros might dismiss him, but then something shifted. A faint glimmer of something in his eyes, something almost like doubt, passed through his expression. The council fell into another long silence. Zyra spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. The variant have always been great. But greatness doesn't just come from power and control. It comes from understanding, from connection. We've spent too long alone. It's time to change. Elder Varros sighed deeply and looked at the other council members. Slowly, one by one, they nodded in agreement, though their faces remained uncertain. Finally, Elder Varros spoke again, his tone softer than before. We will give this a chance. But understand this, Marcus. If this change leads us to destruction, we will hold you accountable. Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of their words. I will take that responsibility. The meeting ended, and as Marcus and Zyra left the council chamber, Marcus felt a sense of accomplishment. The variant had agreed to give their ideas a chance, but the real work was just beginning. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult. The council had agreed to change, but they were still wary. The true test would be whether the variant as a whole could embrace what he and Zyra were trying to build. A society where connection, empathy, and compassion weren't seen as weaknesses, but strengths. As they walked through the city, Zyra turned to Marcus with a small, hopeful smile. You did it, Marcus, they listened. Marcus smiled back, but his mind was already racing ahead. This is just the beginning. We've got a lot of work to do. And he was ready for it. Together, they would change the variant, one step at a time. The Variant Council's decision to allow change was a small victory, but Marcus knew the real challenge was still ahead. The city of the Variant was filled with a quiet tension. People were unsure of what embracing emotions would really mean. Even the children, who had begun to show signs of a new way of thinking, still struggled to understand the full extent of what they had been taught, and how it clashed with the changes Marcus and Zyra wanted to bring. But despite the challenges, Marcus remained hopeful. It wasn't going to be easy, but he had seen the potential in the variant. He believed that with time, they could change. They could build a new society, one where strength came from understanding and compassion, not from fear and control. Zyra had been working closely with the council to develop a new system that would combine the best of the variant's knowledge with the humanity that Marcus brought. There were those who still resisted the idea, but little by little, the seeds of change were being planted. One morning, Zyra called Marcus to a meeting. She was standing in the middle of a large room, surrounded by holographic maps and data. her fingers lightly tracing over the images that floated before her. The room was filled with the hum of technology, but the air felt heavy with the weight of their mission. "I've spoken with the council," Zyra began. "They've agreed to try a new experiment, starting with the younger variant. They'll be allowed to show more emotion, interact with others more freely. It's a small step, but it's progress." Marcus nodded, though he could see the concern in Zyra's eyes. The council's agreement was a sign of progress, but there was still so much work to be done. The experiment might be a small one, but it had to be followed by others if they were to truly change. "What's next?" Marcus asked, eager to move forward. "We'll start by gathering the children again just like before, but this time we'll be involving their families," Zyra said. "The parents need to see that showing emotion, connecting with each other, is not a weakness. It's the beginning of a stronger, more connected society." Marcus smiled, feeling a sense of purpose. "Let's do it." The next week, they gathered the children and their families in a large hall. The room was full of tension, parents watching their children with wary eyes, unsure of what this new direction would mean for their society. Marcus stood at the front, ready to guide them through the next phase of this transformation. Zyra stood beside him, her presence steady and calm. She had become a symbol of the change they were trying to create, but even she felt the weight of the task ahead. She glanced at Marcus and gave him a small nod of encouragement. "Welcome," Marcus began, his voice carrying through the room. "Today, we're going to try something new. We're going to learn to connect with each other, not just through our minds, but through our hearts. It's not about abandoning logic or reason. It's about realizing that we are stronger when we care for each other." The room was quiet, the families looking at Marcus with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. He could feel the eyes on him, but he kept going. This was important. He couldn't let fear or doubt hold him back now. "I know that many of you are unsure of this," Marcus continued. "But I promise you what we're doing here today is not about weakness. It's about making us stronger, making our society stronger. The connection we have with each other is the foundation for a brighter future." As he spoke, he could see the families beginning to relax. Some of the children smiled, excited by the idea of doing something different. Others still seemed uncertain, but Marcus could tell that something had shifted in the room. "We're going to do an exercise," Marcus said. "I want each of you to think about something you care deeply about. It could be a family member, a friend, or something you've done that makes you proud. Whatever it is, I want you to share it with the group." There was a long silence as the families processed the request. Sharing their feelings wasn't something they were accustomed to. But Zyra stepped forward, her voice gentle. "It's important to share, to be open with each other," she said. "This is not just an exercise. This is how we build connections, and we need those connections to move forward." The first volunteer was a young boy, no older than 6. He stood nervously, his hands clenched by his sides, but then he took a deep breath and began to speak. "I care about my sister," the boy said quietly. "She's always there for me, even when I'm scared." A ripple of surprise spread through the room. It wasn't a long speech, but it was real. It was honest. The boy had shared something he truly cared about, something that mattered to him, and the room felt a little warmer, a little more connected. One by one, other children began to share their thoughts, their feelings. Some were small, simple things like caring for a pet or helping a friend. Others were more complex. Parents shared their love for their children, their hopes for their families. Some even spoke about their dreams for the future, dreams of a society where they didn't have to hide their feelings. Marcus watched all of this unfold with a sense of pride. This was what he had been hoping for. This was the first step in creating a new kind of variant society, one that embraced connection and compassion. As the exercise came to a close, Zyra stepped forward again. "Thank you all for sharing. This is the beginning of something important. The variant will no longer be a society built solely on logic. We will be a society that cares for each other, that connects with each other. And we will build a future together, one where emotions are not seen as weaknesses but as strengths." The families left the hall that day with something new. The children felt lighter, as though they had opened their hearts to something that had been missing. The parents were still uncertain, but they saw the change in their children, and it gave them hope. Slowly, they would begin to understand the importance of what had been started. Over the next few months, the variant society began to change. It was slow, but it was steady. The children who had embraced the idea of connection began to influence their parents. They started to see the value in being open, in showing kindness, in expressing their emotions. It wasn't always easy. There were still many who resisted, but there were more and more who saw the benefit of the new way. One day, Zyra called Marcus to the council chamber again. The council members, including Elder Varros, were gathered, and they had something to say. "We've seen the changes," Elder Varros said, his voice steady. "We've seen how the children have changed, and we've heard the stories from the families. It's not easy for us to admit, but you were right, Marcus. We have been wrong. We cannot continue to live in isolation, in fear of emotions. The variant must change." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had known that this day would come, but hearing it from the council meant more than anything. Zyra smiled beside him, her eyes shining with pride. Together they had done it. "There will still be challenges ahead," Zyra said, her voice full of determination. "But this is a new beginning for the variant. We will no longer be ruled by fear. We will embrace the power of connection, of caring for each other, and with that strength we will build a new future." The variant had changed, and so had Marcus. When he had first arrived, he had been unsure of how he could help. But now, standing in front of the council, he knew that he had made a difference. The variant were no longer a people bound by fear and isolation. They were a people on the path to true strength, a strength that came from their hearts. And together they would face the future, not as conquerors, but as a united, compassionate people.